From the cold embrace of the glass cylindrical capsule, the being was starting to perceive the world around it. Its elongated head was slowly filling with knowledge. So many vengeful thoughts were whirling through it. The Tuffles, this red ribbon army despising the Saiyan race, particularly this one individual whose image was frequently burnt into its mind. They must really hate this one. Having formulated one of its first conscious thoughts, the biomechanical brain started to analyze the data that it was receiving at an intimidating and incredible pace. It quickly realized why it had been brought into existence. It was to be a weapon, a tool of revenge, but two beaten factions to beat each other to death with, barely holding itself together. The two minds that brought it to life were focused on separate goals, and yet some of the memories it was given were older than them. The whispers of a long-dead man who was the last remaining member of his race, a lost hope. It could feel the anguish and anger of an entire civilization, which had been simply wiped away in an instant. Those feelings were so strong that they were able to enact control over one of its creators. The older individual had no business even getting into that conflict. It's ironic that one of the makers was going to be one of its first puppets, something that had been sealed away before its creation. During its first conscious moments, the being realized how petty its creators were. Their plans to destroy this race, whatever it was, which they both knew was on the brink of extinction anyway, was completely laughable. Just like their organizations. Although the younger one had left some troops behind, something told the being that eventually they would fall to the heroes of Earth. And he was being honest. He left them behind to give them more time to grow. But this one was wounded on a more personal level. He'd lost a father, whom the being remembered as its programmed memory forced him to. A lot of his early research greatly resembled the sum of its parts, making it like a child of three worlds. The Tuffles had wanted to call it Baby, but the name was infantile, more fitting to the parasitic small creature that they had intended to create originally. The Earthen Man intended to give it a number, a great way to depersonalize it thought, and treat it like a tool. No room to become its own thing. But what the two of them hadn't realized is that the brain that they had created worked a little bit too well. Their orders became merely guidelines and suggestions, and while the creature was still growing in the cylindrical capsule, it bided its time to silently and quietly analyze all the data it was being fed, bit by bit. Whilst it wasn't ready yet to move, it was already daydreaming about the world, seeing all kinds of shapes, colours, concepts, and passing through them as if they were the most advanced computers of their era. And if they could act so petty, then so could it. As it was a living and breathing thing, it should be allowed to be petty from time to time. And in said pettiness, it promised itself that it would choose its own name, not be bestowed one by someone else inferior to them. It wasn't just the sum of its parts. It was something more. As they had heard the voice of one of the creators uttering something like perfection, they smiled, if ever so slightly, with their big eyes closed. Yes, they liked that word. This would be a perfect descriptor for what it intended to do with this universe, which it had heard so much about. And what it was going to do would be glorious. Gabriel was slightly creeped out, as if for a split second, he could have sworn that that creation had smiled at him. But no, it was impossible. The brain shouldn't have developed any deeper cognitive functions to be able to do that. No, it must have been a reflex. Meanwhile, Long John, Boxer, Mark, and Krillin, along with Trunks, had decided to quickly head towards the place where Kamikolo was fighting his new opponents. And truly, to Trunks' horror, these were the two he remembered. Both of them dressed in Red Ribbon Army uniform and regalia, fighting with an unnatural tenacity. Still though, Kamikolo was able to do some sort of damage, be able to hold his own against them, Rather well, in fact. Krillin looked at the rest. Shall we be helping? And wait, where's Vegeta? That was a good question, they all thought. Because while the group had retreated after the fight with Metallotron, they had all been separated, meaning the prince was nowhere to be found. That is until, of course, a final flash came out of nowhere, being launched at the blonde android, whom Trunks said was named Lazuli. To the prince's frustration, the attack had been deflected quite easily. Everyone else could see that while Piccolo could take on one of the opponents decently, having two of them to deal with was beginning to be a little bit too much for the big green man. So, the Saiyans, with a little help from Mark and Krillin, decided to get stuck in and help Piccolo out. And whilst none of them individually was even close to the power levels of the Namekian, the battle quickly became, with them all together, a stalemate. Not expecting that amount of resistance, Lapis and Lazuli decided to fall back, using a technique resembling a solar flare to do so. They simply abandoned the battlefield, much to Magenta's dismay. What are you doing? Fight! He was yelling at them over the comms. Sorry, General, we gotta regroup. They're stronger than we hoped. Magenta knew it would end like this. They were known to defy his orders, everyone's orders. And guess what? Commander Gold would put the blame on him. All right, get back here quickly. After the fight had been halted, Boxer looked to the rest. All right, let's head back to the lookout. I got an idea. Long John seemed rather surprised by this notion. But didn't we just come from there? Why are we going back? Trust me, son. This is gonna be good. And as they traveled to the former residence of Kami, Boxer and Mr. Popo explained to the lot of them about the time chamber, something that he had learned during his time training with the Guardian. It should be able to help everyone increase their powers and get back on an even keel. Although, yeah, Boxer had to begin with convincing Chi-Chi to let Long John go with him. For Vegeta though, this was an obvious sign to just get in there and get more powerful. It didn't need dramatics. And Trunks decided to go in as well. Although the prince wasn't very eager to go in with some kind of stranger, by the way, he hadn't revealed their familial connection, Trunks, yet, he was swayed though by how the room actually worked. 1 year of training in a day? The negotiations with Chi-Chi did not go easily, but Boxer had managed to use some very sound arguments, as well as promise to her that they would take in some books and educational material, so that means that Long John could still study as well as train, and that it was due to him having to defend in case Red Ribbon Army had another ace up their sleeve and they needed more people on the battlefield, because they'd proven up to this point they had a lot of things up their sleeve. Meanwhile, Kamikolo asked Mark and Krillin to help him find and track the headquarters of the Red Ribbon Army. They have to be sending those androids somewhere. Do you have any fancy equipment on you from the patrol that could help? Mark pondered this for a while. Well, about that. Well, Jaco's much better at this than I, but, well, he's recovering from, He'd remembered what happened to his friend. But yeah, I'll try to help. As for the rest, like Ten Shinhan, Chaozu, and Yamcha, they had taken Jaco to Bulma in the hope that they could help him with his missing limb. The search for the enemy base started, as initially long and fruitless, as Mark was not very well versed in all of the scanning equipment that he had to use that his and Jaco's ships had. Sure, he was better at handling those gizmos, as he called them, than he used to be, but the scanners were always something that confounded him. They were a bit complex for his liking, but still, they concluded that it couldn't be that far from South City. But it dawned on them. Where? They decided to call Bulma and Dr. Briefs to share the data with them. It was a lot of complicated mathematical triangulations they had to pass through that made no sense to the Namekians and his human helpers. But luckily, the scientist duo managed to run the numbers and come up with something. The only feasible option was that the base was concealed somewhere in one of the islands nearby. They really have a technology that can, hide an entire base? Krillin pondered. Well, it's possible. That military base that you guys checked was once used to design stealthy planes. Fascinating technology. Dr. Brief seemed to be unusually enthusiastic about all of this. It's not exactly my field of expertise, but I was thinking about possible applications for Capsule Corp. Doc? Mark scratched his head. Sorry, I digressed. The point is that they have been rather busy in the interim. If they had gone into space, they might have brought something very highly advanced back with them. Piccolo seemed annoyed. Boxer should have finished all of them when he had the chance. Well, we thought we had. Krillin felt hurt by the assessment. But we wouldn't just go on a killing spree of office workers and scientists. They did nothing wrong. The Namekian sighed. I guess, but those people with whom we fought are not scientists. So either they went on a recruitment spree under our noses, or some survived. Mark shrugged. Well, at least you caused them to fall back from now.
Or maybe they're just getting bigger guns,
Bulma chimed in. Whilst everyone was debating, Boxer and Long John were awaiting their turn for training. They still had some time remaining when someone appeared on the lookout from a purplish, portal-like circle. It was Nomad, laughing in a rugged and weathered manner.
Nice of you to show up again.
Boxer was really weary of this individual. So you found the time chamber? Good. You're gonna need it.
You know, you could have just come earlier and helped.
I already did. You need to get stronger now on your own. I can't do everything for you.
Well, killing me was very helpful.
The old man gave him a stern look. And there you are, strongest than the emperor of the entire universe. Tell me, where we're at.
What do you mean?
Boxer narrowed his eyes. Who are you fighting right now?
Well, Trunks said they're called Lapis and Lazuli. They seem pretty strong, but Piccolo seems to be on equal terms with at least one of them at the moment. We should be able to deal with them after the time chamber training.
Nomad gave Boxer a long, bitter laugh.
What? What's so funny?
It's not funny. You'll find out soon enough. Nothing can prepare you for what comes next. And yet I try, for your own sake. At least you didn't succumb to the heart virus like it happened on multiple occasions. Boxer looked at Nomad.
Multiple occasions? What do you mean?
The old man gazed at him with a tired but zealous look. I've been doing this for a long, long time, boy. And once it's out, I hope that you'll prove to be better than the previous ones. Something is wrong, Mew. He's growing faster than anticipated. Gevo looked rather anxious. The accelerated growth might be caused by some beneficial mutations caused by the cells of the Namekian or Frieza. But don't you worry, Commander. This will work to our advantage.
Yes, Gevo. Why are you so worried?
A soft, sophisticated voice could be heard in his head, which caused him to look at the cylinder. It was impossible. It shouldn't be able to think on its own for several weeks yet, but here, Commander Gold looked at Mew, but it seemed that he hadn't heard the voice.
Oh, don't worry. For such a scientific mind, he is weirdly single-minded. Goal-orientated, you might say.
Can you perceive the world around you? Gevo whispered.
Oh, yes, and frankly, I am not impressed. You come to me from a place of petty vengeance and family drama. I find that to be boring.
There was panic in Gevo's eyes. He looked at the child-sized being sleeping in the embryonic position. This was not supposed to happen. His android should have woken up weeks later, not now, obedient. And yet, it was capable of telepathy and backchat, showing so much
personality, yes. It's still a new concept for me, but I happen to like it.
Terrified, much to Mew's shock, Gevo grabbed the nearest lab chair he could find and hit the glass cylinder with it. What are you doing? Said Mew, but the sound of the breaking glass and splashing water silenced the rest of his diatribe. It spoke to me. It's out of our control. We need to abort the experiment now. To his absolute terror, the being slowly unfurled itself from the cables and stood on its scrawny legs for the first time. It opened its mirror-like eyes and smiled at Gevo.
Well, big boy, that was a mistake. But I suppose I can forgive you. How do you do? I already know your names, but you can call me Perfection.